I'll concede your point just for brevity. But
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to a very special Buck Around. This is episode, I'm all out of order. It's episode 336 of the Buck Around. I am one half of the Buck Around, but today I have a special guest as my delightful colleague, which that'll be his adjective today. Maxwell Brusky is unfortunately away and couldn't make the show for this week, but I'm joined by a very special guest who deserves a descriptor because he is like he's the third leg in the stool, the silent partner here that helps get the show on the air. He is the one and only concise colleague, editor Cody. Cody, how are you, sir?
Well, I don't know if I'm concise. I don't know if I've ever been told that before, but I'll accept that. And I'm doing very well and feeling a little sore today after a rough weekend.
Yeah, well, yours was a literal rough weekend of golfing, as that's all you do. You get married and you golf, as far as I know. Those are the two activities in your life, is weddings, nuptials, and 18 holes.
Well, so I just turned 30 yesterday. And I'm feeling it. And I'll be honest, I did not watch a lot of the Badger game live on Saturday night, as I feel like most of our listeners probably turned it off at some point. So I don't feel like I'm completely out of the loop, but I decided to rewatch it today. And well, there's a lot to unpack.
What delightful torture.
Yeah, right.
Well,
nothing says Monday like that.
Yeah, I watched it twice myself. So I feel your pain. Although interestingly, always for me, as I say to Max, the second time through is not as bad for me. I don't know why, but yeah. So I guess we can get into. Oh, by the way, before we get into it, you don't know why you're concise? You didn't figure that one out?
No, I really don't.
Your name is Editor Cody. You get to edit yourself.
I'm gonna make myself sound really good.
Exactly. This is going to be the greatest appearance in the history of podcasts. You will be. I mean, I already know what's going to happen. You're going to listen through this like 4 times and like sharpen the pencil. So I'm very.
And you know
excited.
What's even better is that next week we're going to be on a bye, so this one's going to get a little extra long shelf life.
I know. People are going to come find him, but there's going to be all new people who come to listen to this show. And they're like, boy, this thing sounds amazing. And then the week after that, they're going to be so disappointed. But all right, so why don't we do this? We got to talk about this game. I think to kick it off. Oh, I did forget one other piece of housekeeping at the top. You were supposed to remind me of this. See, I know you've been a Buck Around podcast guest for all of like 3 minutes. Or participant, not guest, I should say. But you got to help me because I can't remember these things on my own. Max helps me with this. To remind everyone, if you are on our Patreon, if you are a member of our Patreon, a paying member of our Patreon, first off, as always, thank you. It helps keep the lights on. It helps keep the show going. It helps, people like delightful editor Cody do the editing. Of course, that's always awesome, and we thank you for it. But if you use Patreon for anything, not just this podcast, you should be aware, starting, I think, at the end of the month, and I should have done my homework before we started recording, but why would I start doing that now? If you subscribe to anything on Patreon through an iPhone on the Patreon app, Mr. Tim Cook is now taking a slice. So any Patreon subscription you initiate through the App Store indirectly, through the app, you're going to pay extra. So the long and short of it is, if you're currently a patron, don't worry about it. Nothing changes for you because you don't have to interact with the app to change your subscription. But if you're ever thinking in the future about jumping on board, why would you do it after this week? I don't know why. That's a special kind of self-loathing. So congratulations to you. But if you ever did do it at some point, go do it on the website. Don't do it through the app on your phone, even though that's the easiest way to do it. So just go to buckaroundpodcast.com and follow the Patreon link. And that extends to anything else you might want to do on Patreon. Like, if it's another podcast or whatever creator you might want to support in that way, don't do it through your phone because you're going to pay more for the exact same thing. So wanted to get that out before I forgot. So on that note, Cody, let's make a really jarring transition to our talk around and we can discuss people's feelings because there's a lot of feels this week.
I've only been able to listen to the first 10 seconds of it, and I already kind of got a good feeling of it. And I will say editing these has become, at least putting the music into it has become kind of a passion project of mine as the last month or so. I've really learned that I can capture sad better than I can capture happiness.
It's easier.
It is much easier. So I guess it's only fitting that I'm guest host after a game like we had on Saturday night.
Yes, let's let it roll and we'll just go from there.
All right. As Max always says, here we
10 straight runs for a touchdown, immediate turnover, click. I'm going to play Call of Duty rather than continue to watch this Badger game because that seems better for my mental health.
Sean from Grafton. Steve from Portland.
This is John in D.C.
Max from Aurora. Ross in Milwaukee.
I think it's pretty clear that Luke Fickell is a G5, not a P4 coach. Well, you look at Indiana. They got some Jamoke from JMU, like Nowheresville, Virginia. He comes in and they go 8-0 now. Indiana's a national power. Well, that's because Luke Fickell choke.
Why can't we go get Kurt Signetti and replace Luke Fickell next year? This seems like the only logical option.
Happy return to standard time, except for the fact that the Badger season just got an hour longer.
Let's just get to the bowl. Get to a bowl game, please.
Expect them to be competitive and not dog walk. They clearly are just a hospital program, and they're ruining all our lives.
The two big tests of the year were USC and Iowa to see any sort of step forward, and the Badgers clearly failed both of those tests.
Soft all over the place. I don't know what the hell they were trying to accomplish when they had the ball.
Braden Locke needs to grow 6 inches.
I forgot to add Braden Locke. Like, he needs to be shipped off this planet and sent back to where the he came from. He doesn't know what the he's doing. He is the worst quarterback I've ever seen in Wisconsin history, and we've had some very quarterbacks. I mean, how can you not be better than someone like Matt Shaver? I mean, Braden Locke can't even fly. He, rolls over like a idiot.
Give me a reason to believe in Wisconsin football. What's the growth story? Why should I believe in this program?
Go Badgers, roll cheese, whatever.
On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, I guess.
Anyway, I'm sorry for calling back.
Can you give me a theme?
Like
what is the yes, a lot of dark. Is that the musical theme? Lots of darkness.
I think that's what we're gonna have to go with.
Yes. So for those who don't know, the music gets added after the fact. So yeah, I am very excited to see where this goes. A lot of themes there. A lot of discussion of Braden Locke by our friend John in DC, who we need to take a breath, but I do like the fact that Jabroni made an appearance. You don't hear that very often on a Wisconsin-focused podcast, so good work, John. But I think before we hit the offense, I think if you're cool with this, I think we got to start on the defensive side of the ball. Because for me, I do feel like the defense is an easier, at least for me, especially on the second viewing through when you're sort of not in the heat of the moment and you're just kind of looking at it. Like that became a very easy story to tell for me.
I agree.
So you cool with that?
Yeah.
All right. So let me pose this question for you because this is sort of where I ended up. And this is a rhetorical question that sets you up for disagreement because people love hot takes. But is there more to the defense than a really bad matchup, that being a power running team against a team with a not so great defensive line, combined with a really untimely injury in Jaheim Thomas getting hurt and hobbling around the field for, I think it was 7 snaps before he called it a day, leaving an inexperienced Christian Allegro to kind of run around a bunch?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, being that it is a really bad matchup because you saw it on the very first drive that the Badgers had it on offense. I know we're talking about defense, but Iowa tried to be the aggressor. They were trying to get the Badgers to have false starts. And then as soon as Iowa got the ball, all they did was run between the tackles. They didn't have to do anything special at all because they knew all you have to do is watch Wisconsin all season. The D-line has been the weakness on that side of the ball, and they got pushed around completely. And I mean, they already have seen Sullivan before when he was with Northwestern. And so they knew what he could do with his legs. And all he had to do was go to the outside. But as soon as Johnson had the ball, they didn't have to do anything special. It was in between the tackles all game long.
It was kind of ridiculous. I mean, they threw the ball 3 times on that first possession, which I think was like the first 4 minutes of the game. I could actually look at the drive chart. And then they threw the ball 7 times the rest of the game because they realized pretty quick that they didn't really need to do much. But I mean, I thought you needed, like, the way they were going to defend this. I get what they were going to try to do. It was basically, it was nickel sets, but then they did bring 3 D-line looks in a lot and went to an even front that basically used, like, Aaron Witt was in there as a sort of a glorified D-end. He played, look here, he had 41 snaps in the game, which if you compare it to, let me look, yeah, he has the most snaps of any outside linebacker. Leon Larry had 34, Peterson had 32, Pius had 24, which again is not the typical division there. You're going to see Peterson playing the most and Witt somewhere down in the teens. And in this game, they leaned on him a ton to basically use him as a defensive end with mixed results. I mean, I think he just kind of got gassed because it was such a workload for him that he's not used to. And he kind of started getting pushed around. But then on the inside, the problem they have is they really have 3 guys that I feel like they think they can trust and who are clearly better than the other 3 between, as we know, it's Neal, it's Barton, and it's Hills. And Hills is more of a pass rushy guy. He's not a gap guy. And there were spots, like I saw Neal actually do things a couple times where I was like, oh, Kurt Neal actually fought through something, or he swam in and actually got in there and almost caused a little chaos. But overall, like, those guys can't play every snap. So you're rotating in Dylan Johnson and Cade McDonald, and they're getting blown up. And then the whole time you're hoping behind them, Jaheim Thomas is basically there to do that sort of 2-gap thing that they do with the inside guys. And after he can't go, it's Allegro, who, I'll give him this. He has, like, when you see him play, what did he, like 59 snaps? Like, he keeps the motor up and he goes side to side. And I think he's going to be a good player. Like, I'm not worried about him. But right now, he looked like, you know what he looked like to me was he looked a lot like what Jake Chaney looked like last year, for lack of a better term. Like, you know, these guys that kind of were going to the wrong gaps and didn't quite know, or like, what's his name? The one on Michigan State, Jordan Turner. Right. I mean, it was the same thing where you saw guys just, they had 2 gaps and they went the wrong way. And it's, you know, this defense and Tressel's defense, to me, the big thing that stands out so far is it needs so much from those inside guys. And it's just, you are asking a young player to play in packages and in situations that he hasn't in the past. So I guess, like, to me, yeah, they got blown up on the ground, but one, you knew they were going to give up some rushing yards because what's the strength of the team? It's the secondary, and that doesn't really help. No. And 2, you got to back up the weakness in your defense with that position that then loses. I mean, I think the guy that they trust the most from it, and the guy who, honestly, like, we've been pretty critical of Jaheim Thomas on here, and everybody has been rightfully, but who had been trending upwards. So stinky.
You know, it's funny you bring up Jordan Turner, who went on to transfer to Michigan State, has had a good season until he got hurt. I think he was their leading tackler all year. So it's just like, you know, you talk about a guy like that, and then all of a sudden, you know, he goes off somewhere else in a new defense and a new system, and he seemed to thrive until he got hurt. But you know who had a really rough night in my eyes was Lowry.
Yes. He got buried on the edge.
Yeah, you know, and it was on that one rushing touchdown. I can't remember. I think that was in the second quarter. He just didn't attack the gap at all. He just ran right by, and as soon as Johnson got to the second level, there was no shot at all. And that's how it was pretty much all game long. The D line was getting pushed back, and the linebackers felt like they always had to over pursue to try and compensate for it. And by the time they got through, they were gone.
Yeah, there was so much wash. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, like, in the post-game fury, in the inferno that was Twitter in the post-game, or, you know, any discussion about the team, like, I didn't walk away from this going, oh my gosh, this defense needs to go back to the drawing board. Like again, I'm still kind of in the space where like, I feel like I get we'll see if it ever works, but like, I get what they're trying to do. I get where it's going. This was everything broke the wrong way for this team to try to have the game they needed to have against that offense. Cause whatever. I mean, it stayed disciplined. They were gap sound. They were hat to hat. And, that kind of just ends up being what it is. I mean, every big run was a cutback, I think, with maybe one exception. So
yeah,
it's going to be what it's going to be.
Well, it's like what you said last week heading into this game is you always felt like Wisconsin, whoever was going to be the winner of this game had to be more technical than the other because they were so similar. And now, and I don't know if it's just because it's a new defense, it's a new system, everything like that, where they're not as technical. They're more relying on their athleticism and it's maybe a tad bit more finesse. I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but it's not, they're not able to attack the same way because they don't have the personnel to do it.
Well, I mean, I'd say, they did keep Iowa to 15 points last year.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was not a good Iowa offense last year. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like all of a sudden it had a game where it just blew the doors off. Like this isn't what Iowa has been every week. I mean, I think we all should be pretty clear on that. I mean, they put 40 on Northwestern and Washington, but I mean, they've had plenty of others where you're like, okay, it's better, but it's not a steamroller. So I'm not, again, I come back to it. I'm not totally freaking out about it. If people want to freak out about the defense, I get it, but I can't get there. I do think the conversation, however, is more interesting when you look at the offense, because I think the offense at this point is obviously, aside from it kind of being pretty much hot garbage in that game, it's an interesting triangulation of issues, right? And I've been trying to sort of like wrap my head around about some of it, because like there was some stuff I didn't make it into the talk around, but people are like, how are you not more angry at Longo? Or do you think Longo should go? Do you think this is a creativity issue? Do you think this is a play calling issue? And people hate when I do this, but I'm not like super mad. Actually, not getting mad, by the way, here's a little tip. Not getting mad makes people get madder at you when you do a podcast, Cody. I don't know if that's a little secret for you. But
I've learned that just in life.
Just as a guy who's a little more, I can't get that wound up about this stuff, but like, I don't know. I look at this offense and you can say, well, he created this. And so he hath wrought this. Fine. If that's people's arguments, that's fine.
Sure.
But I'm still sort of like I feel like they have three issues. Like they're in a triangular room, and I think I've used this metaphor. Is this a metaphor or an analogy? Is this a metaphor? I'm going to go with, this is where we need Max. I think it's a metaphor. He can correct me.
Let's go with the metaphor.
Yeah. So
you can correct me next week.
Yeah. Like I'm in a triangular room and there's a lion over here. There's, what's another big predator? A hippopotamus, because those are deadly. I don't know if you're aware of that. A hippopotamus in this left corner. So for people who can't see at home, I've pointed ahead of me and I've pointed to my left. And in the other corner is a cheetah. Okay, all deadly for you, right? So the lion straight ahead of you is your quarterback. Stick with me. The hippopotamus is your offensive line, and the cheetah are your running backs. And I feel like the problem Phil Longo has right now is if he relies on any one of those things too much, he might get eaten.
Yeah.
And the problem is they seem to they're not quite sure what to do there, and they stay in the middle of the room, and then all three of them attack him at once, and then they get murdered. That's my very technical analysis, because
I like that.
Because like I actually, having rewatched the game, I don't think the big, hashtag narrative right now is the identity thing is back after 3 weeks, and the offensive line is a mess, is like a big thing. And I actually don't think the line wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad, I feel like, as people made out. They ended up in a lot of situations with an uncovered hat, and it was left to Walker or whomever to make a miss, and it didn't happen. I would also argue, honestly, I think pass pro, they were exceptional Like they were
were.
really, really good.
Yeah.
Iowa didn't bring much pressure because they didn't need to, because Braden Locke has an amazing ability to manufacture his own pressure in his head, I think. But they weren't as bad as people thought.
Well, you look at how the 2 interceptions that Locke threw, he had pretty much clean pockets most of the time.
I know.
And especially on the first one, you look at that one, and I know we're going to talk about Locke and the quarterbacks. I know that's on the agenda and everything like that. But on that first interception, I think it was a fake toss or something like that. And pretty much he had Burrows wide open down the middle of the field. He gets that ball out on time.
Yeah.
That's 15 yards, if not more, right there. And he just let him right into the corner, just playing in a soft zone coverage. It was nothing special. I mean, it was just a bad throw with no pressure at all.
Yeah, every interception he's thrown this year has been to a defender in zone.
Yeah.
It's when a defender is allowed to look at him and he is off schedule, he throws a pick. But yeah, so like I was looking at it and I'm like, okay, the offensive line isn't great. Like it wasn't great in terms of run blocking, but it did, I felt like, enough to sort of maybe get a little bit more going there than they had, because the other problem they have is the running back they are leaning on the most right now in Tui Walker. His issue is he is a tackle-to-tackle runner, and I don't mean it as a criticism of him, because I actually kind of like him in the offensive system, but he's a complementary back being asked to do a primary role in my mind. He would be, if you had a little bit more of a stretcher guy in there, like a little more sideline to sideline, I feel like Walker mixed in with him would be better, just because you could challenge the defenses in other ways. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to get Dupree to be. Like, I know people are screaming right now about Cade Giacomelli to me, but I do feel like there is a difference between Giacomelli and Dupree. And I think, I don't know what the thinking there is, if it's like they need to get Dupree ready for next year, because I kind of wonder how much of that is in this conversation. Yeah. But Dupree...
Well, that's the game plan going into the season. Sorry to cut you off, but it was Malusi and Walker. That was supposed to be your 1 and 2. Ches was supposed to be your one cut guy and cut up to the field, and Walker was supposed to be kind of more, I don't want to say necessarily short yardage, but a guy that was going to complement that in some sort of way. And if you could fit Giacomelli or anybody else into that algorithm, then by all means you were happy with it, as long as it was getting positive yards, because you felt like your offensive line was supposed to be good enough to complement your running game to then add to your passing game. But Ches going down, and whatever that situation was,
right,
it threw a huge thorn into that whole side. So you got a guy that coming into the season thought he was going to be a complimentary guy, is now asking to be the lead guy, and then you have a freshman behind him that has, to me, he was the leading rusher Saturday night. It was like 52 yards or something.
Funny you say it. I'll look at it right now, because he certainly had it by average. Yeah, they tied. They both had 52.
Okay.
I mean,
well,
Walker did it on 16 carries, 3.2, versus Dupree at 7 carries at 7.4. Wow. So with a long of 15.
Yeah. There you go. And, and it's not that Dupree really broke off a lot of big runs. I think the biggest one he had was 14 yards, something
15.
like that. That was in the second half. Yeah.
Yep. It was late. Yeah. I mean, the longest run was Dupree at 15. You know who had the second longest run?
Braden Locke.
Yeah. On that amazing scramble. Yeah. Actually, I think he pulled that one, and it was that awesome dive he does. Which
I remember, I think I made a note of that.
It's very elegant.
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
It's like, oh, here I go. But
it's like if a baseball player decided he wanted to slide first, but he's just like, no, I don't want my face getting covered in dirt.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a head first slide, but you're like, I'm gonna kind of like turtle on my way down. It's a very unique look. But you've seen it. For what they want, I don't know that all of it matters, honestly, in the end, because, and I am not a QB guy, but I do at this point think so much of their struggle centers around their limits at quarterback. Yeah. You have a quarterback now who I do like it. I know I was as I said last week, I'm like, I don't want to be vibey, but I feel like I was watching this one and I'm like, oh my God, I really do feel like it looks like it's kind of starting to crush him. He just looks The body language is killing me, and it does feel like I'm watching a guy regressing slowly as he's just becoming afraid of everything that could possibly happen to him. I do, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt or give him a little bit of, what do I want to call it? But I definitely do think they basically said to him in the third quarter, okay, now you're allowed to run, because we haven't seen him run really at all. And then all of a sudden, I think he ran the ball 3 times in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I think he had 1 in the first. And then ironically enough, that's when he cuts up his finger, and then that starts affecting his throw and kind of kills that drive. But I do think in the end, everything they're doing is trying to figure out a way to get him in a spot that he can be reasonably complementary to the rest of the game. And this is, again, I'm sort of reversing what I said 3 weeks ago when I said I don't feel like the passing game is just complementary to the running game anymore. It wasn't, but they're going back. Like I do feel like they're backsliding a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's starting the rest of the year. I know people are like Matoyer. We'll get to that in a little bit. We were going to kind of close on it, but I didn't want to dwell on the game too much just because people are already in the dumps and they don't want to hear you dwell on the game too much. But I did have one question for you. One thing I didn't put on the agenda, and I just kind of thought of it. The Penn State game was October 26th this year. Last year, the Ohio State game was October 28th. Right? Like you had the big high profile matchup last year that you felt like the team was building to. They lost. They kind of held on for a little while, and then they lost 24-10. And then this team cratered against Indiana and Northwestern. And this year, obviously there was the Alabama game, but you know what? There was the Washington State game last year. But the Alabama game this year, you kind of knew like that was a game playing with house money. It felt like going in, everybody was like,
it was early in the season. You still had a whole schedule ahead of you. It was non-conference. It as crushing as it was, you still had a lot in front of you.
And it just kind of sat off on its own. And then the USC game, maybe that one lines up with the Washington State game. I don't know. But more importantly, I feel like a lot of this was building towards that Penn State, right? And then you had a Penn State game with kind of a similar outcome to last year. You had a bad pick in this one versus last year. It was like they fought 4 quarters and moral victory, whatever. I mean, that's the way I looked at that one. But I'm wondering how much of this Iowa game feels like a cratering from that Penn State game, because like so much of what they had now they're just kind of playing for, I don't know. There were just things on the rewatch where it got later in that third quarter where I was like, some of these guys kind of just look beat.
Well, and you could kind of see that. You could see a lot of the frustration on Hunter Woller's face throughout that game. And I don't know if a lot of that was just how the game was going and just, you're getting beat down and you're getting beat down by your rival. And that's never going to feel good for anybody. But I almost felt like there was a side of frustration, with some of the other guys just either missing stuff or just not being in the right spot or not attacking right, whatever. I don't know. That's the vibe I got rewatching that and just kind of going through it. And I'm glad you brought up body language, and I'll kind of go back to Locke a little bit. I feel like the body language that you saw in this game really started with that interception late in that Penn State game.
Yep.
And I just don't feel like, to me, he was having not a great game, but not a terrible game against Penn State. And I feel like that moment on, it just, I don't want to say crushed him, but he hasn't been the same. The offense hasn't been the same. And yeah, you could say that, they got off to a decent start to the Iowa game the other night. And yeah, it came up with 3 points. And all right, okay, we at least got something to start. But then the interception then, in the first quarter, that probably led to a lot of down in confidence. And then just the really bad one, his second one was just terrible. I'm still trying to figure out what lane he thought he had on that throw, because I feel like I watched it from a few different angles, and the linebacker was right there.
It's in his chest.
Was right there. It's in it. Yeah, exactly. And so I just don't know. And I feel like at this point it is a confidence thing. And to your point of, what is this team like and what similarities do they have from last year after the Ohio State game and to this year to Penn State? I feel like there is some sort of similarities, and it's hard not to feel that way, being the way they played on Saturday night. Because, you look at that first drive alone, those 2 false starts right away. It's like, it felt like they had to take time to settle in. It's like, you're going on the road facing a team that you're familiar with, that you know well, and you're having to settle into a game like that. You can't tell me they had a lot of confidence.
It was a very strange one. And I felt like they were sort of, there was a tentativeness to it. But at the same time, I do feel like especially second time through. I mean, I think something that got really overlooked while the rest of us were sort of just we're all sort of, with the lock pick, and you're like, I know how this one ends, and you're just kind of getting deflated. The thing that gets lost, when they went down 14-3, you had the subsequent possession, they went 3 and out, right? And you're like, they're folding like they're just folding. They're done. But the defense got a 3 and out the next 2 Iowa possessions, like trying. And then the Badgers got the ball, on their own 31, and they started to move down the field. And then the stupid, I think it was the chop block penalty, which is a bad one. I'm not a penalty guy. But then they got the false starts, and you end up in a 3rd and 33. And it's like, you felt like that one, I don't know. It's like they went in at that point, and I think the defense just it was like the Penn State game. They held as long as they could. I mean, they really did. They were at 14 points at the half, and then it was like, all right, we're getting the crap beat out of us, and we're done.
And that's the thing. It was a 14-3 ball game at halftime. That I guess in Wisconsin, Iowa terms, if you really want to go back to last year's game, which, that's a 14-3 game is like a 4-score game.
Well, it's also a final score.
Exactly. But I mean, it's just points are typically so hard to come by. So it's like, okay, you go down 14-3 in normal games. That doesn't sound bad, but the offense just couldn't really muster up anything else. And then you really didn't, to me, it didn't feel like they let Locke just kind of let it rip, let it go until that touchdown drive in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, where it's like, okay, the receivers were finally getting some separation, and Locke felt comfortable because he had a clean pocket most of the game. We talked about this in the offensive line. He had a clean pocket most of the game. He was just finally making throws, and some of them weren't great. They were a little bit behind, but at least they were getting to the guys in time. Like he had that big play to Vinny Anthony. They're able to get down the field, and then the touchdown pass to CJ Williams. It wasn't a terrible throw. It wasn't a great throw either, but Williams made a good catch. And it's just like, okay, you could have built off that, and they couldn't do anything more than that.
I does feel like at that point, Iowa's defense was backing off at that point. I mean, I think
it was 28-3 at that point.
It was 28-3. I mean, the game was over. Yeah. They had them 28-3, and they knew they could get the ball back and just keep grinding. And honestly, I really do think in the fourth quarter he was trying not to score. I really don't think Ferentz wanted to score. And that's not like, he was very happy to go home 28-10 and out the door, but they just kept
under and be fine.
Yeah. Like that's his goal in life. So I think that was the part definitely in Fickle post game. That's the part that killed him, was when Iowa was taking their foot off the gas and they still just ground through them. And they're doing it with second and third string running backs. And I noticed some of the linemen swapped out too. And it's like, it's rough, but
I do have one more thought though. So we're talking about the correlation of last year to this year, going from Ohio State to then the games after last year, and then this year going from Penn State to Iowa. Do you feel that with a bye week now, do you think that gives them a better opportunity to regroup? If we do think that, I don't want to say they're giving up on the season or anything, because you still have Nebraska, you still have Minnesota, and you have the number one team in the country coming to your house in a primetime game in less than 2 weeks. Do you think that they get up for that game? I know you guys are going to talk about this after the bye week and everything, but do you think that there's a better opportunity for them to kind of, I don't know, maybe rise to the occasion again?
I mean, I don't think the issue is rising. Do I think that? I think they'll play hard. Okay. I think they will. Yes. I think I'm really curious to see what happens in 2 weeks, because the trick for this team, right? It's you're in this punch counter punch thing going on during the season. And I felt like after USC and after Locke got a little time, like they did have a counter punch. And I don't think it was just bad opponents. Like I think they kind of figured a few things out just in terms of like, okay, we're just going to, toss one up to Vinny Anthony here and there. And that's just going to open things up. I mean, that's literally just going to loosen up defenses. And it started to work until teams basically sit in a cover 2 and take him away. They haven't had a counterpunch for that. Like that's what happened last week. That's what happened this week. I mean, they threw one down there and it was a 50-50 ball and it didn't work out. Maybe the game's different if they get a touchdown there, but I don't think so.
I don't think too much, no.
No. The question is, do they have a counterpunch on the offense? I think Jaheim Thomas has got to get healthy. I think that's quite clear. I mean, it is For me, I do understand, like, there's a lot of these peripheral players, primarily younger guys that people are clamoring for, more Allegro, more Curtis, and I get it. But at the same time, like in that game, it does show you like they don't, I do think there are situations where guys need a little bit more experience. I mean, that's why guys like Tretch play 18 snaps. Like, I don't think you're going to see wholesale change like that. I don't think you're going to see new personnel used all that much. I mean, maybe Yakimelli gets in the game more, but for people clamoring for that, like I know there's people out there clamoring for that. Like, I got bad news for you. That's not revolutionizing things. I actually think in that game, it would have been a tougher situation because he's not getting through that traffic. Maybe he can get to the edge a little bit, but he's not an edge guy. He is cut and he's a north-south, just super fast north-south. Different. He's different than Dupree. So my answer is I don't have an answer for you, Cody. That's what makes this show great. I mean, here's my thing. Here it ties right into my big games in the B1G. So we don't even have to touch that after this. This is all about getting ready for Nebraska because they're not beating Oregon. Also, you mentioned Minnesota. Minnesota has gotten better as this season has gone on. Like that is an improved football team. I do not think that one is a super easy game by any stretch. And I mean, they're not going to be favored. I think they're going to be 3-4 point underdogs right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like they don't win games big, but they just keep winning. I mean, I guess the Maryland game, but Maryland really, after I thought was kind of decent at the start of the year, has kind of gone poo-poo. A little erratic. I mean, they beat USC, but who knows?
Then they barely beat UCLA.
Yeah, it's everybody's barely beating UCLA now. UCLA is oddly slowly like climbing out of the soup. I mean, they beat Nebraska last week, right?
Yeah.
So the goal is you gotta beat Nebraska. Like you gotta set up to beat Nebraska. You gotta get to a bowl game just for the practices. I mean, I know they get talked about a ton by reporters, not the end of the world, but just get to a bowl game, get to the Pinstripe Bowl.
Are you saying that UCLA is trying to be part of the Big Ten West or the old version of the Big Ten West?
Yeah.
You just never know what you're going to get out of them.
Well, it's now, you know what it is? The whole middle section of the Big Ten is just it doesn't matter even if they were in the East. Like they're all playing like Big Ten. Like Maryland, welcome to the Big Ten West. Like you're an honorary member now because it's all these teams that they're just killing each other. It's like rabid cats in an alley, fighting over restaurant scraps.
Yeah. But I agree about the Nebraska game. It's always a big game on your calendar. It's a team that you've dominated pretty much. I mean, literally ever since they got into the conference. The only time they lost was that the first year, or was that the second
year?
Second year. That's right. So I mean, they're a team where they're better than what they have been, but there's still definitely a lot of holes there. I mean, they got a quarterback that's better. They could throw the ball, but I don't know about that defense. And you kind of see that from UCLA where it's like they were able to move the ball a decent amount of time. So if your goal now is to get to 6 wins, you could probably say, we're going to go all in on the Nebraska game in a sense, but you still got Oregon coming, and I'm with you. They're not going to beat Oregon, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe a pride thing that you want to show up for that game. You want to make it tough, and you're going to do that. And I have all the confidence in the world that they will get up for that game. But, you got the number 1 team coming to Camp Randall. I think you also have to have it in your mind that, let's go and try beat them.
Oh, I'm not saying they're just forfeiting and staying home for 3 weeks. I'm just saying that lends to me. I mean, hopefully they show up. Hopefully they can get a clean brain. I do think there is a lot around like Locke throws a bad pick and then they just all get tired. So let's do this. Let's stop talking about those things. You tell me you're under the radar player of the game. You're required to do this as a guest now. You're the first guest who's ever had to do this, or a first non-Max and Rich. I don't think anybody has. I think Andy filled in once, and I don't think he did one on a game week. So,
do you have any guesses about where I could be?
I think you're on the defensive side of the ball. Are you on the offensive side of the ball? Maybe we have the same one because I'm on the offensive side of the ball.
I'm on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't know if it can be really under the radar, being that he scored the only touchdown of the game. But I thought CJ Williams had a good game. You know, the catch that he made, what was it, the first drive of the game? I was like, he got some good separation, delivered a good ball. And he just looked, it seemed like to me, his routes as a whole just seemed, I don't know, more polished in a sense. Like he was getting separation on those corners and he was open a lot more times. And I know he didn't get the target share that, you know, some of the other guys got. And I don't even know what the distribution was between it for the game because we locked through the ball, 29 times?
Locked through the ball 29 times. Pauling got 8 for 2. That's not a great, right? CJ got targeted 6 times. He actually had the second most, 2 catches. One of those was that one that got overturned, obviously.
Yep. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, you look at that touchdown catch, he got great separation. It was kind of soft zone as well, too. But like he made that corner have to second guess himself. And I guess that's the CJ Williams that we've been looking for. It finally showed up in some glimpses in a game that just was out of hand, unfortunately.
Great minds think alike. Because he was mine. I thought it was going to be all sneaky. And you know why I really liked picking him? Earlier this year, I was like, I'm done. I'm out. Like, there hasn't been growth. This guy should be pushing into the rotation, and he is not. And we are not seeing it. I just don't think you're going to see much there. Here's what I will say that he showed me in that game that I feel like I haven't seen a ton of this year. You saw it in glimpses from Will Pauling, but Will Pauling's got the drop thing going on, which I still don't know. He's the only guy, I feel like, in the last few weeks that he has been open through his route running and he's been able to catch in traffic. And he isn't a guy that's been basically open due to play design. Like, I feel like when I'm watching even Vinny Anthony, who is probably the best receiver, I think, on the team this year. Still, I feel like so much of when he is open, it's not he's running himself open. It's play design has him open. Like there's a mesh or he's crossing a zone and they just see the gap in the zone and they hit him and then he can make a play out of it. That's still a good thing, don't get me wrong. But like, as you said, on that touchdown, that was CJ Williams just planting a foot and turning and executing a really exceptional catch. He had that, was it 2 weeks ago? Was it Northwestern where he had the catch? I mean, that was like, wow, you are doing finger strength drills. I can tell. Like nobody does that.
Tell that to Will Paul.
Like, I mean, legit, like he's a guy, I don't know that he's ever going to be an A1 receiver for a team just because of the way he plays, but he's really sound. And then the part that set him apart for me, when Locke threw the ball into, what's the guy's name? Nick Jackson's chest. CJ Williams was like 15 yards downfield. He ran that dude down so he didn't get a pick six. Like everybody.
I was going to mention that. I forgot about that.
In the moment was done. Like you could just tell everybody, another pick. We're out of. He didn't get, like, that dude did not stop. When they were down 28-3, he did not stop. And I think that's a large part of why his snap count has not gone down and has, if anything, gone up. Like, if Bryson Green ever gets healthy, he's having another one of these mysterious injury seasons. I don't know what the deal's going to be, but CJ's found himself a spot. So, yeah, long way of saying I agree.
Look at us.
I know. How boring. Oh, and I should mention for Max, because Max sent me his little notes. He did want to pick Christian Allegro. And he did say, like, he acknowledges that he was out of, he was sort of like out of spots a lot of times. It definitely happened. But was mostly just like, ooh, I'm excited to see this guy in this defense in an every down situation where he actually knows what's going on. He knows he's like a little more gap sound and he's going to be a good player. That was basically his reasoning there. Because he's like, there's nothing good from this game. So let's do this. Let's do a thought exercise to wrap up here, because I think we are sort of at a crucible, if you will, for this season, for this program, for this, quite frankly, coaching staff, I think at this point, because this one got dark and people are, I think, you've definitely gotten through obviously honeymoon period's long over, but you're starting to get into the, that needle is starting to swing on this guy. I am trying to figure out what is a plan going forward for this team at quarterback, right? Because rest of the season, like we mentioned earlier, I kind of have, do you think you start Matoyer? Like if Locke keeps doing what he's doing, where he's throwing 2 picks a game, are you starting Matoyer against Nebraska and Minnesota? That's the thing I'm trying to figure out, right? Like you're not starting Matoyer against Oregon.
No, you can't throw him out there like
right?
that. No.
Are you starting him on the road at Nebraska?
I don't think so either.
So then last game of the season is home against Minnesota, which if you're starting him, that presumes Locke has been really bad. So you have likely lost both of these games and you are battling for bowl eligibility, right?
Yeah.
Are you starting him in the battle for the bowl?
I think it would have to, I think in the circumstance, it would be that kind of what we were just talking about, where Locke's confidence is completely gone and he's had 2 really bad games.
Like, how bad does it have to be? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Know. Yeah. And, you know, and that's the thing. He could go out against Oregon and throw 2-3 picks and, you know, they pull him in the second half. You know, say the scores run up and they're just like, all right, Matoyer, let's see what you got. You know, get him some playing time. And maybe you see some things or glimpses because, you know, in the reporting that we've seen all season long, it's, you know, Matoyer is coming along faster than we thought he was going to be and all these other things, which, you know, just glimpsing off of that, it makes you think, oh, you know, this guy's coming along. Maybe he's not bad. And you're starting to hear that from the fan base a lot. Like, yeah, well, if he's coming along, why aren't we giving him a shot? Because we're not getting a good shot out of Braden Locke right now. So, okay, you're hearing those things. How much of it is actually true? And how much can you really put on a true freshman?
Well, I mean, you saw him play 3 times.
Yeah.
You saw him throw the ball
but there
once.
Was in times that,
against Purdue.
Times that wasn't really anything.
And that was literally just to cut his teeth. It was that little play action. I think he threw like one of those little out things to Nowakowski where it's off the RPO.
It reminded me of when Mertz would come in on garbage time for
exactly.
Cohen. It was just like, oh yeah, this guy can throw the ball, and it's like, well, yeah, sure. In that circumstance, yeah, absolutely, I'm sure he can, and he did, but you're not really going to see anything.
So, like, I mean, just to me, and to your point, like the way he is used, he did not look close to ready, and that's fine.
Yeah,
right. It doesn't mean anything. But so, all right, so we'll concede the point that there's probably no way you're playing anybody but Locke the rest of the year. So you go into the offseason. You have Braden Locke, theoretically, who comes back as a junior. You have Matoyer in your quarterback room. You have Landon Locke, currently committed in your incoming class, who has a torn ACL, really hasn't played this year in high school. Are you going to battle with that? Let's start with that. That's currently what you have next year.
I don't think you can.
I don't think you can either, right?
No. And I think that's kind of, you know, when after Tyler Van Dyke got hurt earlier in the season against Alabama, where you got that little snippet from Fickell saying, you know, we want Tyler back if we have that opportunity to, because I feel like even in his mind back then, he's already seen what Locke can do last season. Granted, he was in the same situation that Matoyer is in right now, not being that he's starting, but he's a young guy learning the system, getting into it, and you can't just throw that into the fold. So you're going to want a guy that's experienced, and yeah, Locke is experienced, but how much better can Locke really get? And so you have Tyler Van Dyke, who you've seen play, you know, the expectation. I remember you guys talking, you know, before the season started and kind of early on, you know, it's just like, you know, we know what we're going to get out of Tyler Van Dyke. He's got a little bit of athleticism. He has a strong arm, but he's going to make those mistakes similar to what Braden Locke is. It's kind of almost like a slightly better version of Braden Locke with a little bit more athleticism.
It's a bigger arm. That's
bigger arm. Yeah. And so you're going to probably want to invite that back, but it would be very hard for me to think that they don't go try and dip in the portal somewhere.
Well, let's hold on that for a second. So let me ask you this. So, okay, let's say you want to bring Tyler Van Dyke back for his doctorate or whatever he's going to be doing for his 19th year of college. What if that you're cool with, that's going to push Braden Locke out the door, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what that tells Braden Locke is.
And that you're going to lose his brother too.
So that leads me to my next question. Are you okay if you lose the Locks, right? So you're going to lose your 2025 quarterback and your theoretical semi-functional back, right? I mean, Locke, you can't count him as he's gone, right? If you bring back Van Dyke, so it's Matoyer as a second-year quarterback, and that's what you're looking at, and Milos, and who knows about like the Cole LaCruz of the world, right? So that's your quarterback room. Where does that put you? Is that a better spot than Locke, Matoyer, Locke?
Well, to me, I guess in a sense, it becomes a numbers game where it's like, okay, if you're getting back Van Dyke, you're getting Matoyer in his second year. He hasn't really had any game experience, but he's a guy that's going to be in your system for an entire year, and he's going to have a full off season to go off of and keep learning and keep practicing and starting to get more opportunities with maybe a little bit of the ones, more so the twos. Okay, so you have Van Dyke coming off a torn ACL, and you have Matoyer who doesn't have any playing time. I mean, theoretically, it doesn't sound good if you're going to be then losing a guy that's pretty much started for you the entire season, but you're not getting a lot out of him. So to me, I would say, yeah, bring back Van Dyke.
Yeah, I think that's the
way I
better
lean.
option.
Yeah, I agree, because again, you know what you're going to get out. You know what you're going to get out of both. But I like what more I'm going to get out of Van Dyke than I would out of Braden.
So then that leads to the next one. So Carter Smith, right? The guy who was committed to Michigan. Michigan's basically recruiting over him. He's out the door. Sounds like the Badgers bounced pretty quickly there. Assuming he comes in, that if they get a commitment from him, I'm assuming that means Landon Locke is out the door.
Well, are we assuming in this scenario already that Braden's already gone? Like we're taking Van Dyke, or are we just talking?
I don't know. Well, the reason that has me, I know Fickle said that, and I was like, he's just hedging his bets, and I kind of wrote it off at the time. But I have now seen him. He was there for the Penn State game. He took the trip to Iowa. Like, he's around the team.
Yeah.
Like, they are keeping him in the mix. I feel very much like, take this for whatever it is. I mean, that's a dude who's he's got the ACL brace on the knee and the range of motion thing. Like, it's a production to get him there to a certain degree, and to get him to do, I mean, it's not easy, right?
No.
So if you're bringing back Van Dyke, right, I have to think this quarterback's in the mix, because to your point, I can't imagine the two of them don't leave, right? I mean, you do have the Lyles brothers. I mean, they did split up. So who knows from back in the day with Chris, but that was a pretty amicable.
Yeah, I feel like it was just kind of like, all right, we've seen what we've had out of you.
Yeah.
And it was a mutual thing.
Yeah. Like Corey Lyles, I think, recognized my future is not in FBS.
Yeah.
But so that one, I mean, that one that one makes sense to me. But then the last piece is, do you think that there is a reasonably better, I mean, we don't know who they're going to be, but I'm just thinking of where they are in the market. Do you think there's really a better option than Tyler Van Dyke in the portal for the Badgers? Just based on where they are. I mean, I look at where they are in the marketplace of the transfer portal.
I don't think you can get much better. There's going to be better guys out there, obviously, but I don't think that they'll be able to attract that much better than Tyler Van Dyke. I think it was a shock to me that they were able to get a name like Tyler Van Dyke, and I think that's why there was a lot of excitement in the offseason. I feel like it was kind of the same thing with Mordecai, where, all right, there was a guy at SMU that kind of lit it up. He had 10 touchdowns in one game. It brought an excitement to the fan base, and it was like, okay, this program can bring in guys that maybe at smaller schools, but a big name, guys that can produce things. And Mordecai had a fine season. And then you got a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, who, you and Max have talked about this before. Just a couple of years ago, he was already getting first-round grades out of him, just being a freshman at Miami and putting up really good stats. And then going through all the coordinator changes and coaching changes kind of changed his trajectory a little bit. And you got to see a little bit more of the bad side of Tyler Van Dyke. So, with that part, I feel like that's the kind of quarterback that they are able to attract maybe a little bit more easier, kind of not a necessarily under radar guy, but like either a really good quarterback at a lesser school, maybe not so much like lower power 4, but kind of like the group of 5, or kind of a power 5 quarterback that's just looking for a new home, because that's kind of what we've seen already. And that's easy to say, but I don't know how much better they can really get than a guy like that.
That was sort of my thinking is, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, here's the thing. Tanner Mordecai, they pulled him from SMU. He wasn't planning on transferring. Longo came in. Longo had a connection with, what's his face? The Kyler Murray's dad.
Yeah.
And that was how the connection was made. He put his name in the portal, having basically already agreed he was going to Wisconsin. That was where like Longo's capital couldn't have been higher, right?
Yeah.
Last year, what did they get? They were like, oh boy, we're really interested in Cam Ward. They got the guy that Cam Ward pushed out of town.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like you have diminishing returns in the portal until you can hit, right? They haven't demonstrated in this new iteration that they can make a guy work at Wisconsin, and Longo still has the magic, right? The only way, and this is kind of where my thinking was going, the only way they can hit in the portal is going to be a prior connection to a quarterback. And there's only one way to get a prior connection to the quarterback, and that's if there's a coordinator change. And I'm not advocating it, but I think you're looking at Tyler Van Dyke most likely as the starter next year. I mean, that's where my head is now, unless they change coordinators. And I'll be interested. I don't know that it's in Fickell's interest to try to bring in a new coordinator let's really kind of feel like a make or break year next year in his long-term interest, but it might be better in his short-term interest. And I am very curious to see what happens there, because this is the story for the rest of the year. Like, this year is, do they make a bowl, and how are they going to approach the offseason at quarterback? Because the other part of it is the one thing I didn't even mention at the top. You're going to be running Darian Dupree and I don't know what out at running back, right? So a young running back, and you are potentially running out 4 new offensive linemen because Nelson and Huber are out of eligibility, I believe. Renfro might be able to come back, but he kind of sounded like he wanted to leave last year. And then he made this big announcement like, I'm back. Like, well, yeah, you never were here. Riley Mollman, I just feels like he's done. So it's Brunner and maybe Renfro, and then Kevin Haywood at who's going to be a starting tackle. I mean, that's sort of ordained at this point, and then figure it out. And who are you going to do that with?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a tricky part to figure out.
Well, and I think it's something to even think about in this whole equation is how much of a pride thing is it for Fickell in this whole situation? You know, that was the big thing when he got hired is, you know, we're going to change things up in how we do offense at Wisconsin. And, you know, it's the air raid and throwing the football and all these other different things. And you kind of see them kind of go back to their roots. I don't know if because they more so had to with the personnel and also with, you know, injuries to quarterbacks and just different personnel changes and whatnot. And, you know, you've seen them run the ball more. And even though you've always had Phil Longo say, yeah, you know, we're going to run the ball and that's going to be our identity, but, you know, it's just going to look a little bit different. But that was the big storm and story around when Luke Fickell got hired, is how they were going to change the offense up so much. So what do you change it to from what it is now to what it was and what it's going to be? To me, that's a bigger question. If you are thinking about doing a coordinator change, is how much different can we do this? And if you do get a new coordinator in, how is that going to attract anybody either? Outside of connections. Well,
that's what it's, I mean, I will say this. I think Fickell has a decent network.
Yeah.
He seems to keep being able to find guys. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that. This isn't like late stage Chris hiring Al Johnson to be his running. I mean, like, it doesn't feel like you have to explain anything.
Yeah.
Something could be done there. I think it's more, the only way I think there's a change, I think, is if Longo is like, I got to get out of this. Like, this, we're just not working, you know? Because
to me, that seems more like,
I feel like there might be who knows? I mean, I don't buy into the, you know, like 2 weeks ago he was fired, and then 3 weeks ago he was fired, and then they won 3 games and everybody's like, everything's well. So who knows? But it has to be a thing where Longo just doesn't think it's going to work too. Like, I think it has to be both of them, because he's got another year on that deal and he's got to get another gig. But we'll know really quick in early December. But I do think, I mean, just to tie it back, like, you're looking at Tyler Van Dyke most likely next year. Especially if they get, I'll be really curious. The cards may fall really quick if this Carter Smith guy commits. Like, that sort of is a broadside, you know, a broadside, across the bow, a shot across the bow. I did 2 things at once there. Means we're running long. Oh my gosh, this is where I say, Max, we gotta wrap this up. We're over an hour. Cody's gonna
look
kill
at us.
Look what. See, now you know why it happens.
And now I get to edit it afterwards.
But that's going to be the crux of it. I think that's everything I had to say. Are you at peace now?
I am at peace, yeah.
All right. Cody, this was fun. Did you enjoy yourself?
Yes, I definitely did.
See, it takes a couple minutes and then you just get in the flow and you forget you're recording a show. You're just talking for a little while.
At the end of the day, we're just talking football.
Yeah, it's just like the old Zoom dinners people used to do like 4 years ago. Housekeeping for the last time. Don't forget the Patreon thing I mentioned at the top. Also, you said it, but we're actually not doing a show next week unless something happens. But there's not. We don't need to get into anything crazy in the Bible.
Maybe the people want round 2 of Cody before the next game. I don't know.
If they demand it, I mean. That means you have to come up with the whole thing. I'm just going to show up.
I'll do it.
And you get to pose the questions, and then I just get to ramble. Does that sound good?
It sounds like we have a show for next week.
All right. I guess on that note, until the next time.
Until the next time.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.